So I haven't made really any videos for the past few days. I've been working really hard on 18 alligator wallets. Isn't this pretty? Look at all those colors. These are the backs of the wallets. Of course, this is like basically step 1 of 40. Look at all those colors. Isn't that pretty? I might be dead by the time I finish these up because it's absolutely an enormous amount of work. It's true that if you can't explain something simply, such that a child could understand it, then you certainly truly don't understand it. I want to talk within this 20 or so, probably less, hopefully, minute video in explaining something really simply. And of course, talking about a purified soul is seemingly ridiculous, but we have no qualms in hearing somebody else talk about gold purification. As in the case of investment bullion, which is 999 purity, or four nines or 5 nines. Of course, it has to be extracted, millions of dollars of equipment. It needs to be crushed and tumbled, and chemical baths supplied, and it's just an extraction to take it out of its host rock. A rich buddy of mine brought me this. This is actually from the Yukon. I don't know if you can see it or not, but this is actually gold right here in the host rock, and you can actually see the gold over here. I hope you can see that. If you can't, it's there. I showed it to everybody last night in live stream. They were really fascinated by it, even though, the question is, let's say there's like $50 worth of gold here, right? Let's assume that. It might be more, probably is more from what I could actually tell. Why can't I spend this? There is gold here, and let's say there's $50 worth, maybe even $100 worth, especially since gold's basically over $2,000 an ounce now. Gold is gold is gold, but there's 14 karat gold, like the necklace that my dead wife gave to me, which is basically 58.3%. So when you see 14 karat, only 58.3% of the piece that you're holding is actual gold, even though the item is itself gold. 14 karat, 10 karat, 24 karat, and it'd be like bullion grade gold, right? Or in the case of silver, same thing, purity in the case of bullion. So, soul is soul is soul, exactly like gold. So where do we get the idea of a purified soul? What would the definition of liberation mean? Isn't water, 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 right? But water is not water. Something that is quantitatively pure might not be qualitatively pure, because gold is always quantitatively pure, but qualitatively, I can see the gold in this. I know there might be $50 or $100 worth of gold in this. But, I can't spend it, and it would take, I don't know what the mechanical efforts and chemical baths required to extract this gold, but it might take, and mines actually work off how many ounces per ton to know whether it's viable, because there's an enormous amount of diesel and mechanical, millions of dollars of equipment applied. It's like how many, unless there's X amount of ounces per ton, it's just not viable to extract it. It might be if gold gets super, super, super high, and that's actually a consideration. When gold actually in the past is dropped into the pit, then they shut the mine down. It's still all the gold's there, but it's just economically unviable. Kind of a crude analogy, but it's one that's been used for thousands of years. Same is true of soul. However, soul is not gold, but it has actually been spoken about analogously, exactly like gold. So what would we be talking about regarding a pure soul? And how does wisdom play into this? Now, I'm going to stick what people have spent a lifetime trying to figure out into this very short video. Literally a lifetime trying to simplify something, make it really, really, it's like, perfect clarity. You've not made it difficult, right? Purified soul, what does it mean? Purified gold, what does it mean? Isn't gold scattered amongst something? Isn't this $50 or $100 worth of gold actually scattered amongst this host rock? And it might take $100 of labor to get out $50 worth of gold, and of course it's economically unviable. However, of course, the soul is absolutely priceless, and it is that which we truly are, hence the phrase tattva masi or aham brahmasmi. I'll look at 2 really short passages, and then I'm actually going to explain it, well, actually 3 passages, and explain it with, I think, absolute simplex clarity. such that anybody could understand it. There's one is in Pali, the other one's in Sanskrit. One in Pali is Bhavanirodha Nabadam. Means the subjugation of, nirodha, the ending of, the cessation of becoming. Bhava is no different ultimately in referring to becoming of what by, becoming would be like riding the roller coaster of life. Ups and downs, ups and downs. Isn't that exactly like a frequency modulation in the case of a signal? It's literally exactly like that. Becoming. They actually would talk about the moon as the king of Attabhava, self-becoming, self with a capital S. Because the moon is the moon, edit that out. The moon is always waxing and waning. It's perpetually becoming. As the light waxes, and of course it wanes. So that's why they called the moon the king of Attabhava, or self-becoming. So nirvana means the subjugation or ending of, or the cutting off of becoming. Modulation. Wouldn't it be the case that it's being scattered, which is exactly the same as saying diluted? Because scattered is diluted. Diluted is scattered. Wouldn't that be no different than saying modulation? You're under perturbation or agitation, as is the case of the fruits of primordial agnosis, desires, fears, so on and so forth. That would be the case. So nirvana is the ending, or the subjugation of becoming. Yoga, this means the fruit of yoga, i.e. liberation, but the passage is just 4 words, and it's incredibly important. You can take all of true metaphysics, and I mean true, T-R-U-E, true metaphysics, into this one passage, which only has 4 words. You don't need to know Sanskrit. I could translate all of it for you, and you can understand it. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga, i.e. the fruits thereof, meaning liberation. When you say liberation is... there's that one word again, nirodha. Same in Sanskrit it is in Pali. Nirodha, the ending, the cutting off of vritti. Vritti means perturbation or disturbance. This is like saying modulation or scattering. Yeah? So liberation is the cutting off of, nirodha, perturbations of the spirit or self, which is the chit. This would be spiritus sanctum, or in the Greek it would be nous. In Sanskrit and Pali, the word is chit. Doesn't mean consciousness, this thing up here. Unfortunately, mind and consciousness in English are the same, but they are completely different terms metaphysically. Mind is a pre-embodiment, is pre-psychophysical. Consciousness is the byproduct of matter and spirit. It goes no further than the conjunction of matter and spirit, i.e. psychophysical being. So liberation is chitta vritti nirodha. In this case, vritti is no different than saying bhava. Vritti means perturbation or modulation. Bhava means becoming. So becoming, modulation, perturbation, one and the same thing in the metaphysics. Both these passages are ultimately the same. Nibbana equals yoga, yoga equals nibbana. They both refer to liberation. And they both talk about the ending or cutting off of, nirodha, either becoming or vritti, perturbation or disturbance. Wisdom is self-proximity. It's just this crazy word, which is not about psychophysicality. It is about self-proximity, i.e. self-actualization. Here's another passage. This is actually the most important passage within the Nikayas. I've been translating the Nikayas now for, 25 or more years. Whatever forms, feelings, perceptions, experiences, or consciousness, i.e. vijnana, there is, i.e. the 5 aggregates, rupa, vedana, sana, sankara, vijnana, i.e. the psychophysical. These he sees, meaning the bhikkhu, the devotee, the person that's on the path of wisdom, who is udam soto, someone that's going upstream, because turds and trash go downstream. You remember when people grew up and they were telling us to go with the flow? It's like, you know what goes with the flow? Turds and trash. Called udam soto, means going against the current, against the stream. These he sees without permanence, as suffering, as ill, as plague, as a boil, a sting, a pain, an affliction, as foreign, as otherness, as empty, shunyata. X is empty, Y. There's no such thing as emptiness. This is something Western nihilists really get wrong. There is no such thing in any passage in Sanskrit or Pali talking about emptiness. It only talks about that which is empty. Yeah? As empty, as without soul or selfless. In Pali the word is anatati. It's a compound, without the soul. Yeah, and of course, Buddhists, and by Buddhists I mean people that call themselves Buddhists, they think that Buddhism is different than that Hindu stuff. These are no so. Well, that's doctrinally inaccurate. There's no substantiation for that ridiculous, absurd, illogical, irrational, and non-doctrinal statement, by the way. So he turns his nous or spirit or mind, i.e. in the passage it says chitta, which is a non-aggregate, away from these, i.e. the psychophysical, rupa vedana sana sankara vijnana, i.e. namarupa. Namarupa is just an ancient Pali word for psychophysical. Away from these. In other words, if you turn yourself away from it, that means it's not part of it. This is simplex metaphysics. Therein he gathers the chitta, or mind, or nous, or spirit, whichever word you want, within the realm of immortality, amataya dhataya. This is tranquility, this is nibbana, this is that which is most excellent. That's Majjhima Nikaya 1.436, also 2 Anguttara Nikaya 4.422. In one last passage, very, very short, how is it that one is deemed a Buddha? Gnosis, i.e. wisdom, that the nous, or the mind, or the chitta, whatever word you want, who gives a damn, is purified, vishuddhya. Have we been talking about purified gold? Because gold is gold is gold, right? Water is water is water. The soul is the soul is the soul. So why do people talk about a pure soul, purified gold, and purified water, right? Water is water, but we don't drink out of the toilets like dogs do because it's impure, right? Well, why not? Water is water is water. Why don't you drink out of the toilet like your doggy does? We all know the answer to that. It's like, well, it is water, but it's scattered amongst other things, just like this gold is scattered amongst the host rock. Yeah, might take $100. You get us a big hunk of gold back here, by the way. You can see the gold right here. Maybe you can see it. It's right there. It's scattered. Gold is gold is gold. The soul is the soul is the soul. How do you purify soul? The soul's already pure. Water is water too, but there's water that any wise person would not want to drink. Dog's not very wise. Dog's happy to lap out of the toilet bowl. You know, where the poo is floating just like 20 minutes prior. Scattering equals modulation. Modulation in the ancient Pali is Sanskrit. It's vritti, perturbation, or bhava, becoming. Every radio on Earth works off of the same principle, that it's tuning something under modulation. And you say frequency modulation, FM, or amplitude modulation. It is a disturbance of energy. When there is a disturbance, there's a release of energy. When something is disturbed, a release of energy occurs for that modulation to exist. Think about that just for a second, please. A release of energy. That is magnetism, by the way. The three-dimensional force vector that extrapolates out magnetism, the toroidal field geometry, is itself a disturbance. It's a modulation due to the release of energy of the dielectric at the plane of inertia, or you could say at counter space. Who cares what words you want to use? So modulation is dilution. Modulation is impotency of spirit. Wisdom, would it not then necessitatively be the case, which is no different than saying self-proximity, and I mean self with a capital S. Not self with a small s. The self with a small s is this flesh and blood thing you see when you brush your teeth, right? We're not talking about that self. We're talking about the transcendent self with a capital S. Wouldn't it be the case that wisdom is undiluting something? People say, what's theurgy? What's apophaticism? Well, it would be the process of wisdom or undiluting. It would be synthesis. Taking something, and you take a 5-gallon bucket of water, perfectly clear distilled water, you drop in like 5 drops of the super concentrated red dye, right? Oh, it's beautiful, it's kind of pretty when it's, and then 30 seconds later maybe, you can't see, it's gone. Well, it's there! Where did it go? It didn't go anyway. It didn't go anywhere. It's still there. It's under dilution. Wisdom, of course, is undiluting something, i.e. making it concentrated. Yeah, not decentrated. Decentrated, which is no different than saying dilution, is modulation, is scattering, is bhava, becoming, is vritti, perturbation. No different than, you can't see it. Yet nobody on this earth can deny that around you and around me right now there are a million different frequencies There's AM, FM, satellite, cellular. All you need is the proper receiver, and you could, man, it would boggle, it would make your brain pop like a cork to realize how many millions of frequencies are passing through your body and are all around you every microsecond, every millisecond. To create that modulation requires the release of energy, which is the dissipation, the scattering, the modulation of something which is pure. The soul is the soul is the soul. Gold is gold is gold, but I can't spend this, even though there might be $50 or $100 of the gold here. It's very beautiful. It's beautiful rock. This side's polished. Look at all that gold. Yeah, but, you know, someone might give me $20 for this rock, even though it's got $50 or $100 of the gold in it. It even smells like gold. Just kidding. Gold doesn't have a smell. There's centripetal and there's centrifugal. And anything that's centrifugal is under modulation. Frequency. That frequency of magnetism might be the centrifugal. Force vector is called geomagnetic precession. It's also too called the Lamore frequency. The release of energy. Modulation. When something is modulated, it is diluted. Do you know what energy is diluted into? Against itself, the negative image of pure potential is space. Space has no properties. Nikola Tesla said this over and over and over and over again. And he despised Einstein for thinking space had properties. You could bend it and warp it and all this other relativistic trash, which is completely untrue. Centrifugal, of course, equals force, equals scattering, equals dilution. Force is willing oneself towards evil, desires. Genuine metaphysics is hyper-rational, it's hyper-logical, it is hypersensible, it falls 1000% in line with Occam's razor. It is undeniable with anybody that has 3 brain cells which love wisdom. It is 100% undeniable and 100% impossible to refute. It is hyper-logical. True metaphysics is nothing like any kind of belief system, i.e. religion. You just believe it. It's crazy. Yeah, but you're right. It doesn't have to make any sense. You just need to believe it. Well, that itself is crazy. Not only was that crazy, the notion that you just believe it, just that believe it, is even more crazy. Pure metaphysics, in a nutshell, is hyper simple. It is extremely simple, but it is not simplex. It really is simplex also, but you have to have wisdom to have clarity, be able to see the forest for the trees. Just understand what scattering and modulation, disturbance, becoming is, the release of energy. I mean, that is the centrifugal force vector that is fundamentally magnetism, and magnetism is the dielectric field. The shadow and darkness is not something in itself, it's the absence of light. I'll talk in a day or two about constructive and destructive interference. Kind of interesting that the destructive interference, because people love to say energy is never created or destroyed, it's only transformed. That's absolutely not true. Tons of energy can be lost in counter space. A sink that vanishes from this universe. In the case of destructive light interference, you know, it is not transformed anywhere. It disappears from this universe of phenomena. But this universe of phenomena, by definition, is modulation. To be able to put metaphysics, true metaphysics, monistic metaphysics, i.e. what the Greeks called prohodos, which basically means going forth, but what it refers to is the metaphysics of emanationism. Emanationism is the metaphysical principle of Pythagoreanism, original Buddhism, and I do mean original. Advaita Vedanta, the Upanishads, on and on and on and on and on and on. There is no first cause or original sin. So then we have to ask ourselves, what is liberation? It's the ending of modulation. There's no frequency on this earth of any variety, from radio to light, that can be tuned, that is absent of, imagine a sentient signal which is under modulation. It's under modulation by its own nature, which can either increase or decrease. What if it were to completely null and be absent of frequency modulation and or amplitude modulation? Well, it would become completely untunable. It would then no longer be considered a frequency, because a frequency implies it has a frequency, or a modulation, or a disturbance in the case of bhava, becoming. To say becoming is no different than saying scattering, no different than saying modulation, it's no different than saying vritti. Vritti just means disturbance. Yeah. Liberation is ending of the perturbation or disturbance, vritti nirodha, of the nous or spirit. That disturbance is desire, primordial agnosis, fears, angers, on and on and on and on. To speak of a pure soul is no different than talking about pure gold. Gold is gold is gold is gold is gold is gold. Period. So why can't I spin this rock? Because the gold is scattered and diluted amongst the host rock. You'd have to do a lot of work to extract it. This is the difference between potentiality and actuality. This is metaphysics in a nutshell. I have made something extremely complicated according to millions of people that have tried to explain this in many, 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 many books, and have put it into a 20-minute or so video. I hope you appreciate that. Everything I said in this video is 100% accurate and 100% undeniable. If you like this video, everyone to contact me. My information is in the description below. Any donations always warmly welcome. Lux e veritas. Goodbye.